It is like it's all about going all in. I'm very much like when you have a goal, right? When you decide, okay, this goal that I want to go for, you have to know how much are you willing to go through to get to that goal, because not all goals are the same, right? If I've got a goal to a small goal that doesn't really get me moving and emotional, then maybe I'm not prepared to walk over hot coals to get there. If it's a big goal, then I know I have to know that I'm prepared to go through whatever it takes to get there. When you set goals, they don't often talk about the sacrifice that's required and what the cost of that goal is, because there is always going to be a cost associated. So you have to understand what your goal is, what it's going to cost you. I think people go mostly into goals and they sound fancy. Like let's take a running a marathon goal. Sounds great. Well, it's on my bucket list, so I want to do it. Well,
I remember Bob Proctor said, don't ask if you are worthy of your goal. Ask if the goal is worthy of you, because you're going to be trading your life for it. Lisa Tamati, welcome to the Keto Kamp podcast.
I'm super excited to be here, Ben. Really excited for it.
You're living in the future because you're all the way in New Zealand, right?
I am. Yep. We're at the beginning of the world.
Yeah, exactly. You told me the future looks bright.
Yep. It's a beautiful sunny day in the future. So really nice to talk to the past.
Yeah. Thank you for joining me. I know it's Saturday morning for you, Friday afternoon for me. And, right off the bat, those listening and watching, the goal of this conversation is to really inspire somebody who might be going through a challenge, whether you are feeling depressed or you're worrying about the future, there's some sort of challenge you're facing. You're going to get so much from this conversation because Lisa has incredible, inspirational, pain to purpose to promise stories that she's going to share with you. So I'm going to leave it to you, Lisa, to start right from the beginning. How did you get involved with what you're doing? What are some of those stories that you'd like to share with my audience today?
Oh, fantastic, Ben. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm been a professional ultra marathon runner. So I did super long distance racing, and expeditions and everything. Pretty, extreme long distance was my thing. Did that for like 25 years. Did over 70,000 kilometers around the earth, a couple of thousand Ks in the Sahara. So I did a lot of Sahara races, like Moroccan Sahara and Tunisian.
That's really cool.
Desert. Oh, amazing, different places in the planet, Libyan desert, Niger, Jordan, Gobi Desert in China, Death Valley in the USA a couple of times, a fantastic race over there. Himalayas, outback of Australia. And at one point I ran right through my country, through New Zealand for charity, which was, I don't know the miles, but 2,250 Ks in 42 days, which nearly bloody killed me.
Which one was your favorite? Which one was your most memorable?
There's a couple, but Death Valley in the USA was a pretty special event for me. That was a 217 Ks, so 135 miles in the heat, the hottest desert on earth. Wow. The funny thing is, though, Ben, I'm not a good runner. And I want to just start with saying that I have no talent. I was not born with amazing genes. I was an asthmatic as a kid, in and out of hospital, very small lung capacity. My VO2 max is a disaster. I come from Māori ethnicity, half Māori, half Irish German. Not the right build, everything that wasn't meant to be. But the thing is, I decided I wanted to do this type of thing, and I got good at it after years and years of doing it and getting experienced, and sort of ended up sort of in the, number 10 in the world at one point, sort of thing.
Wow.
But it's a really, not a super talent, and then I would like to share, I'd love to talk about some of the learnings from those expeditions and races. But then I'd also like to talk about some of the setbacks I've had in life, and some of the greatest learnings from those that actually aren't to do with running. In my latest book, I'd like to share and talk a little bit about that as well at some point. But without to give it all away, shall we start with the running?
Yeah, let's start with the running. But I just want to extract something you said. You said you weren't made to run. You had all these problems, asthma, etc. You weren't really built to do these type of things. And you said, I decided I wanted to do it. And you did it enough that you might've sucked in the beginning, but you got good doing it enough. So that's a key takeaway. There's a difference between being interested in something versus deciding and being committed. And obviously you were the latter, you were committed, and you did it enough times, the frequency made you really good at it. The frequency brought the genius. So that's a key nugget right there that I got right away. But yeah, let's get into the running, more into the running stuff.
Yeah, the frequency is, yeah, it is like it's all about going all in. I'm very much like when you have a goal, right? When you decide, okay, this goal that I want to go for, and you have to know how much are you willing to go through to get to that goal, because not all goals are the same, right? If I've got a goal to a small goal that doesn't really get me moving and emotional, then maybe I'm not prepared to walk over hot coals to get there. If it's a big goal, then I know I have to know that I'm prepared to go through whatever it takes to get there. So there are varying degrees of goals that we have throughout the day in our lives and our over time, and we have to sort of ask ourselves, what where does this sit on the goal radar? How big is this thing for me? What am I prepared to give up? Because when you go, and this is something that people don't often talk about, when you set goals, they don't often talk about the sacrifice that's required and what the cost of that goal is, because there is always going to be a cost associated. So you have to understand what your goal is, what it's going to cost you to some degree. I mean, you can't see into the future, but you have to know this is going to take time away from my family, cost and financial, time away from my career, whatever the case is, so that you're actually aware of what you're in for. I think people go mostly into goals and they sound fancy, like let's take running a marathon goal. Sounds great. Well, it's on my bucket list, so I want to do it. Well, yeah, but do you know that the time commitment per week, the time commitment over the year, the cost that will be involved, the time away from your children, all of those things have to be added up. And that's not to say you don't do it, but you go in with your eyes open. Rather than your eyes closed as to what's coming up. And then there'll be things that come at you from sideways that you weren't expecting, especially when you're doing something new. You start a business. I mean, and you'll know from doing what you do, I bet when you started, you didn't know it was going to be that hard. It's right. Always harder than you think and longer than you think. But, going back to the running.
I want to just, before you get into that, I love what you said about understanding the challenges and the risks, or everything involved with accomplishing that goal. Because I remember Bob Proctor said, don't ask if you are worthy of your goal, ask if the goal is worthy of you, because you're going to be trading your life for it. So is it worth it?
Exactly
what you're saying.
Yeah. And then sometimes I look back over my life and the amazing sporting stuff that I did and things, and think maybe it wasn't worth the price that I did pay for some of the things, if I could go back in time and maybe not do that again. And you're happy to have done it, but you think, maybe not, I'm not going to do that again, and we live and learn. But, I think with running, if I can just take you back to a younger me, I'm quite old now, in my early life, in my early 20s, I was with a partner, a boyfriend, who was a very extreme, amazing athlete. And he sort of exposed me to the world of travel, because I'd been very much a little Kiwi girl on this island, had never been out of the country. Met this young, amazing guy, and we got together and we cycled around the, dozens of countries. We trekked, we climbed mountains, we crossed deserts, we did all this adventure stuff, and he introduced me to what I was capable of. Unfortunately, he'd had a very rough childhood, and it was a very abusive relationship. I'll just say what it was. And no reflection on who he is today, I'm sure, but back then, that had a massive impact on me. So there was a constant being told that you're not good enough, that you're hopeless, that you're never going to achieve anything, and your genetics are poor, and you're never going to be a good trekker, runner, kayaker, fill a blanket. I wasn't good at anything, so I was constantly getting this, and I was very isolated. He was Austrian, I was living over in Europe. I didn't speak the language, I'd separated from my family, all of that sort of thing. So what this led to was me being very, on the one hand, it was like being in a boot camp, for 5 years that I was with him.
Wow.
Going through SEAL training at the same time having an abusive sergeant major telling you that you're hopeless all the time. And
was it verbally abusive and physically abusive, both?
Both, but mostly verbal.
Okay.
But it definitely a little bit of physical as well. But it was that you're disappointing. You are hopeless. You know, you're in this constant in day and night. And because he was such an amazing athlete who did not get weakness, he hated weakness, you know. And it just I don't want to go into the details of that story, but this led to the culmination of this relationship, or the end point, if you like, was when we were crossing the Libyan desert. Now, this was an expedition that we were doing with 2 other guys, and it was the first time we'd ever been with other people. And we were doing a 250-kilometer section of the Libyan desert. It was highly illegal. It was a military barred zone. This was the most incredibly beautiful desert you could have possibly imagined. Of all the deserts I've run, it was amazing. So we wanted to go there and cross it and write a book. And the partner was a photographer and so on and so forth. And so we went and we started this expedition. And as we had to sort of disappear into the desert from this oasis in the middle of the night, away from the military, it was pretty dodgy, okay? It was pretty up there. And we only had 2 liters of water a day and temperatures of around 40 odd degrees during the day and very cold at night. And we had backpacks. Well, my backpack was 35 kilos. The guys were 40, 45 kilos because all we could carry was 20 liters of water plus all our gear, right? So we had a maximum time to get through of 10 days, but we're trying to get through in 7. And 2 liters of water a day and 40-degree temperatures, if anybody knows anything about deserts, that doesn't add up, right? It's not enough water. You need about 10 times that, you know, 10 liters at least.
40 degrees Celsius?
Yes.
What is
so
that?
That's, oh, God, 115 or something like that.
Oh, my gosh. Let's see. It's 104. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, or something. Yeah, I don't quite know the brutal heat, right? And you've got this massive weight that you're carrying, and you've only got, and we had no maps of the area because at this time there was no maps of that area. We only had a pilot map that we'd got from the US military. God knows how we got that. Anyway, it was led by this Yugoslavian guy who was a survival expert, and he was the head of the expedition and had invited us on. But it was the first time that we'd been together as a group, and the boyfriend was wanting me to help him with the photography. And the leader of the expedition said, well, you can take photos, but we've got to cover 45 kilometers a day, which is 28, 29 miles long.
Wow.
With these backpacks, you got to keep up, right? And so he was like, right, you boyfriend said, you have to help me with the tripod and do all the set up, the shots. And I'm like, I can barely stand up with 35 kilos. Like I'm 58, 59 kilos, right? This is like 2/3 of my body weight. And he wants me to help him with the photography. And I physically couldn't, to be honest, and keep up with the guys. And so this boiled over. So the leader of the expedition said to my partner, hey, you can't treat her like that. You know, you're being really abusive and this is not okay. And this was the first time anybody had said to me that this behavior was not all right. Okay. Because for me, it was normal. And so these 2, you know, alpha males, if you like, had a big fight. and this culminated, and it was very frosty in the group, and we're still, you know, doing our trek. And on day 4, when we're really massively dehydrated, I can't explain to you the torture of real dehydration, like real, you can't, you know, your lips are cracked, your mouth's swollen, you're in deep shit. Okay. Wow. And so you're already very short tempered. You're not in a good space. And when people are under pressure, you're not exactly great to each other. So, you know, put that into context. But these guys, you know, were fighting it out and I was in the middle of it, of course. And the partner said, right, that's it. I'm leaving. The relationship's over. I'm leaving and you can stay with them. And he packed up his backpack and he left us, you know. And at that point was a real turning point in my life because I started to fall to pieces, you know. It's first love of my life, and he's leaving me in the middle of the Libyan desert. And I don't know if I'm going to survive this. The dehydration is very severe. I don't know if he's going to get alive, because one twisted ankle out there, and if you're alone, there's no coming back. So I'm terrified for him and for me, and I start to break down, and then I'm like, hang on a minute. I can't be breaking down here. I've got to get my ass home. I've got to survive. And I owe it to the other two guys, not to cause any more trouble, but to get on with it. So in that moment, I sort of learned one thing. I learned to compartmentalize and to really pull myself together and to be able to function no matter what is going on in my head, no matter how much my life is falling apart. And a very long story short, we survived, obviously. It was real touch and go, and you'll have to read my first book, Running Hot, for that whole story. That one there, it's called Running Hot.
Yeah, good, perfect title for that.
Yeah, Running Hot, yeah, exactly. But it was a time in my life when I got through that desert. The partner got through as well. He made it out faster than we did, actually. But I had physical damage. Took me 2 years to recover physically. Emotionally, it's taken me a lot longer to get over that. The relationship fell apart. And it was a point in my life. It was a low point in my life when I said, and nobody is going to treat me like that again. And I am not. And at that time, my confidence level was absolute zero. I thought I was the most useless, ugliest, horriblest person on the planet, because I've been told that for years. And I had to climb up out of that hole. And this is what ultramarathoning gave me, because it took me 2 years physically to recover. I had kidney damage. I had nerve damage. I had all sorts of problems afterwards. But a couple of years later, I was out of the relationship, and I was hoping, I wanted to keep having adventures, but I wanted to do it in a bit more of a safer environment than we'd been in. And so I came across a magazine article about an ultramarathon in a place called Morocco, and it's called the Marathon des Sables. And it's 240 odd kilometers running across the Sahara, and it's touted as the toughest race on earth back then. And it's you've got 9 liters of water a day. You've got doctors, you've got journalists, you've got airplanes, helicopters. It's like a big military camp that moves every day. And I'm going, I reckon I could do that. Having survived the Libyan desert, same distance, only 9 or 10 kilo backpacks. I got 9 liters of water a day, and I've got all that.
And now you have support too.
Yeah, they have support. And I'm like, I reckon I can do that. So I managed to get enough sponsorship, got down to this race, did this race, and it was life-changing, Ben, because I was surrounded by these amazing people having this incredible experience. And yes, it was tough, but it wasn't that tough. It was tough, but it wasn't, wasn't Libyan desert tough. And I was surrounded by people telling me I was great and I was doing amazing, and positivity and all of that, and the comradeship and the friendship. And I just so needed that. And so that made me addicted to it. So then I just went from one race after another race, and the rest is sort of history. And that's how I got into ultramarathon running. Very long story.
Yeah, I know you're like me, an addictive personality, right?
Oh yeah.
It's something you want to put that energy into something positive. Otherwise, it could be.
Oh yeah, it could be disastrous.
You said something. Well, that's an amazing story. First of all, I mean, incredible. Sorry, you went through all that, but everything's on the way, not in the way. So it's all experience. But you said something. You said when your boyfriend at that time, the first love of your life, left. He's like, I'm out of here. You started to go. Your mind went into this place where, like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna die out here. I'm dehydrated, and all of a sudden, you said you
compartmentalized. Yeah.
Compartmentalized. That's the word I'm looking for. And you started to now control your thoughts into, okay, what are some action steps? Positive action steps that I can do to get out of here. So I love that you said that. And I wanted you to kind of give some coaching to somebody listening or watching who might go through something similar, meaning not they're out in the desert running and all that, but a crisis. Okay. Yeah. You just lost your job. Somebody has COVID, whatever it is. Like, and then your mind starts going crazy. So what are some tips what are some coaching you give to that person for them to do something similar, to channel that energy into, okay, something positive that we could do to take action here?
Yeah. You need to take control of some aspect of the crisis that you're going through. And you need to. So when you're in a moment like that, your amygdala takes over, and your amygdala is a very primitive part of the brain that does this fight or flight response. And so you usually you get tunnel vision. The blood goes into your muscles so that you can either run. It goes away from your immune system, your digestive system. All of these things happen within a split second, really. What you need to do then is you need to get control of your breath for starters. I mean, these are tips I didn't know back then, but I know now. And because what you'll probably find is you start hyperventilating, you start using the upper third of your chest, and this is telling your body that you're in danger. So the first thing I do now in a situation like that is get control of my breath. And by I do things like a 5, 7, 8 count of a breath just for a couple of minutes, depending on the situation, But
so inhale 5 seconds, hold 7
hold
seconds,
for 7.
exhale 8 seconds.
Yeah, and you really the exhale is the key piece here. The exhale tells your body you're not in danger. When you're breathing shallow, your body stays in that fight or flight state. When you're in that fight or flight state, your prefrontal cortex turns off. So, i.e., your logical, intelligent brain starts to turn off, and you react in a reactive way. And you've probably seen people, and you've probably done this yourself. Someone flips you the bird in traffic, and you want to punch their head in immediately, right? Because that's immediately the amygdala is switched on, and before the civilized you goes, well, that's a bit of an overreaction, the amygdala you may have gone, fingers out the window or and that's a typical amygdala reaction, right? It is about ready to fight or run. So you get control of that. And then I like to, if I'm unfortunately I've had some really horrific family situations, medical situations, try to give people jobs so that they have things to do, because again, that turns on that prefrontal cortex, stops you freaking out, and look for what you can control and really, focus in. And if it's something like, you've just lost your job, COVID's just ruined your entire business, which, we've certainly faced this year with the stuff that we've been going through down here. It's like, okay, obstacle. Where's the opportunity in this obstacle, and how can I get around it? And instead of going into that freeze, oh my God, I've lost my job, and what else can I be and do? Just start taking small action steps towards something. Is what I find is really good. So if I'm a speaker, and one of my main jobs is going to conferences and speaking. This year there was no conferences for the last 2 years, right? Pretty much over here. Okay, just lost a massive part of my income. Can't do that. Do I freak out, or do I go, right, where's the opportunity here, and what else can I do? I can start doing more online. I can start going into virtual. I can start writing another book. I can start doing, brain goes into 100 places, and then you sit and you work through those things, and you start taking action steps towards those areas. And sometimes you've just got to compartmentalize in the moment, especially if it's in a medical emergency or a situation like in the Libyan desert, where you're just focused on the next task at hand, keeping that breath under control, and do what you can do in the moment, and then look for help, look for whatever the case may be, but not going into that everything. Like in that moment in the Lebanon desert, I was like, for a bit there, I was like, my relationship, I love him, I can't I'm going to fall to pieces, and then I'm like, I can't be doing that. And in medical situations where I've had with my family, where I've gone to the same freak out, which you do in the beginning, you've got to go like, okay, what can I do here? And I've got to stop the emotion. Stop the emotion for that few seconds or a few minutes in order to get something going that needs to be done, if that makes sense. You can cry afterwards. You can fall to pieces afterwards, and I typically do, in a safe environment after the event, not in the middle of the event, if that makes sense.
Now, all that makes sense. It's great advice. The prefrontal cortex shutting off and blood being directed to the amygdala. That's just a survival mechanism, because back in the day that actually helped us. And, now it's different, because it's the same stress, or I should say it's a different threat, but same stress response.
Yep.
So I love that, and the breathing part is great. 5, 7, 8 through the nose as well is better than the
Through the
mouth.
nose.
Yeah,
Absolutely
always
through
through
the
the
nose.
nose, more parasympathetic.
You're on
So
it.
yeah, you that was your went over the running part, which is your first book, and then now you have a recent book that came out, which I want you to get into, like why you wrote it, the story behind it. It's called Relentless: How a Mother and a Daughter Defied the Odds. So
Yeah.
share that story.
Yeah, so I've written 3 books. So the first 2 are the running sort of stuff, and there were 140 ultra marathons in between, there in the third book.
Crazy, that's amazing.
But the third book, Relentless, this is this one
That's
there.
it.
This is my
Yeah.
beautiful mum on the cover.
Mhm.
So 6 years ago, my mum had a massive aneurysm. So that moment that we were talking about, that
Mhm.
happened where you get that phone call, mum's collapsed, get to the hospital now. You get up there, and from the get-go, Ben, we had a medical misadventure. The doctor ignored what the ambulance thought she was having a stroke or an aneurysm or something of that nature, and said to the doctor, and the doctor just ignored and said, "Oh no, she's having a migraine," and left her for 6 hours dying with an aneurysm. And at that point,
Wow.
we didn't know she was having an aneurysm. Obviously,
Yeah.
I'm sitting there, I have no idea about anything. I've never studied anything of this nature. I'm taking my cues from the doctor. She's in extreme pain. I know something's really not. This is not a migraine. I've seen her with migraines. This was no migraine. I don't know what to do. After 4 hours, I rang a friend who was a paramedic and said, "Hey, you know the people up here. Can you get up here?" And something's major wrong. I don't know what to ask for. She comes up and says, "Oh, stroke, aneurysm." Goes to the doctor and says in no uncertain terms, and she knew the staff up there, "Get her a CT scan right now." And he's like, oh, okay, sort of shocked out of his lethargy, and after 6 hours, let us have the CT scan. The CT scan came back, blood right throughout her brain. Massive vessel had burst, the main carotid artery into the brain somewhere. ICA had burst. Anyway, blood right throughout the brain. At that moment, they didn't think she was going to survive, especially because she'd been left for so long. But they start to hurry. Now, we live in a little regional place. They had to get her to a major hospital. So they said, right, we will get an air ambulance. Now, the air ambulance took another 12 hours to come. And she's, hanging on for dear life now. In that moment, my dad, who's been a firefighter and he's, the rock of our world, who's always the tough, strong man, he's like, we better start planning the funeral because they're talking about her dying. And, my dad's just, breaking because he's been married to her for, 50-something years.
Wow.
And I grabbed my dad and I said, "Dad, she's alive. She's breathing. I promise you I'm going to do everything in my power to get her back or die trying. Now, I want you to get in the car, drive to Wellington, get my brothers, do this job, do that job." And he was like, "Right, yep.
Yeah.
Oh, right. I've got a
Back
job to do."
what you said, give them tasks. Yeah.
Give him tasks. So he did that. I stayed with my mum another 12 hours, panicking, and in that time I started to go, right, I have to be in control. I have to be, again, what can I take control of? In the critical situation, I couldn't actually do a heck of a lot because there was nothing that even the hospital could do until they got her to Wellington and got her into surgery and so on and so forth. But I started to study. That was something I could control. So I started reading about aneurysms, what happens, what the follow-ons, what the drugs, what the procedures are. And I started to arm myself from that moment on, going forward with what I could be in control of. We got her down to Wellington. She was rushed into hospital. They did an operation, started to drain the blood off. It was then going to be touch and go for the next few weeks whether she would survive. Now, they did an amazing job. They did another second operation, did a coiling operation. She had another massive stroke. She was in and out, long story short, in and out of a coma for the next 3 weeks, hanging on to life by a thread. These incredible surgeons did an amazing job, and she stabilized and she survived. This whole time I'm
That's
studying,
incredible.
watching.
Oh
They've incredible doctors and so on. Great team.
Your mom's such a fighter.
That's where
you get it from, huh?
Oh yeah. She's a fighter, all right. So she's 74 years old. She's now come through this, crisis. She's stabilized, but when she's woken up from the coma, she's got basically hardly any higher function left. So she's not much over a baby. She has a couple of words she repeats, but that's about it. She's got no control over her limbs. She's paralyzed on the right side. She has no ability to control any of her, bodily functions. She doesn't know who I am. I look into her eyes. She has no idea who or what I am. So she's alive, but there's nothing much there. The doctors are then, right, we'll put her into rehab and stuff, but, things aren't looking good. They bring her back to New Plymouth, into our hometown. We start going through rehab, and they're like, I can see they're going through the motions. They don't believe there's anything possible, right? I start studying now. I've done a lot of stuff at altitude, and I was starting to see things in my mum that I'd seen in myself when I had altitude sickness. And I'm like starting to connect the dots, and I'm going, I don't think she's breathing properly. I think she's got sleep apnea. I want a sleep apnea assessment. The doctors are like, don't need that. What would we do that for? So I went and got an outside consultant, smuggled him into the hospital one night, happened to be a friend of the family, so smuggled him into the hospital, did the sleep apnea assessment overnight, and it came back severe sleep apnea. So she was stopping breathing hundreds of times a night. Her oxygen sat levels were down at around the 70%. This meant that in the air, like deadly, she was chain-stoked breathing. Like she was not going to be with us much longer at that rate, right? She was stopping breathing hundreds of times, and this was because of the brain damage that she had suffered, right? And so we showed this to the doctors, and they're like, oh, okay. So we put a CPAP machine on her. That meant she was getting oxygen or getting breath, throughout the night now. Now that meant that she wasn't continually knocking off the brain cells that were trying to recover, right? Because you imagine you've got massive brain damage, your brain cells are trying to recover, and then you're not breathing. So that was my very first one. And then I started to think, well, what else can oxygen do? And I came across something called hyperbaric oxygen therapy. Now, this is a very powerful, anyone listening to this who has anybody with a brain injury, or anyone with cancer, or anyone with concussions or strokes or diabetic wounds, or look into hyperbaric oxygen therapy. Very powerful, very underutilized as well, because there's no money in it. Anyway, I studied this, and this is where they use this for dive accidents. It's what they put divers in when they, been down really low, and then you have to be in a hyperbaric chamber, and it simulates being under pressure. So what they found is that it's very beneficial for brain injuries. And it's used in certain countries of the world for that, but not in New Zealand. And so then I had to battle to try to get her access to one of these. She's still in the hospital at this point. She's been there for 3 months. They're saying, look, she's 74, brain damage is massive. You've just got to put her into an institution. You'll never cope. She's 24/7 round-the-clock care. My opinion was that if I could get her home in her environment, around her things, with her family, then nobody can look after my mum like we're going to. We're a dedicated family. We're gonna, and I just came up against a brick wall of them saying to me, "You will not cope. You will not cope. You'll be back here begging." And I had this big meeting with the doctors, and they all deciding, on mum's fate. And I'm fighting to get the resources to take her home so that we can have a little bit of support at home, caregivers and so on. For an hour in the morning and an hour in the night, and they don't want to give it to us because it means it stays in their budget, basically, instead of being in someone else's budget. And so we're at odds. And so what I want to get people to get from that is, when you're in the public health system, you are at odds sometimes with the resources, right? Yeah. There is only so much to go around. And if you want to fight for your loved one, because they're the most important thing in the world to you, they are not the most important thing in the world to the person on the other end of the budget, right. Okay? So you have to know that you have to advocate. And that's not to say, the people are bad. It's just to say the, resources are limited, but if this person means something to you, you better damn well fight to get what you need. So I had a real battle in there. And we had this horrible social worker who really just wanted to stick her in a home. Luckily, I've got a brother who looks like The Rock, and he accompanied me to a couple of these meetings, and we got the resources that we needed. I won't say
he's big and burly, and he's
huge. He's this, great big rugby playing dude. And
behind me, brother.
He would just sit behind me, and we got resources we needed. And that's not the greatest way to do things. He didn't do anything, say anything. He doesn't have to. He just would accompany me to these important meetings. And that really helped. And I got what I needed to get my mum home. So the day I got her home, I had gone to a commercial dive company who had a hyperbaric chamber because I couldn't get access to, it anywhere in the hospital system. They wouldn't let me, even though they had them in Auckland and Christchurch, they wouldn't let me have it for brain injury. So I approached a commercial dive company. I said, this is my research. This is the situation. Would you let me use your chamber? And they said, yep, we will. Sign a legal waiver. We'll go through the lawyers. We'll do it all properly, and we'll let you do that. It's amazing people. So they let me use their chamber. So the day I got mum out of hospital, she's this fragile, very sick woman, can't do anything, doesn't know anything. Take her into this factory, stick her on a forklift, stick her in this hyperbaric chamber, and start putting her through these sessions, an hour and a half a day, 5 days a week, as per the protocol that I'd worked out. And in this time, just starting. I know everything ins and outs now of every aspect of what I'm doing. Everyone thinks I'm nuts, right? Everyone thinks there's no hope. What the hell are you doing? Look, accept what you can't change, right? And I'm like, nah. I've been told my entire life, you can't run across Death Valley. You can't do this. You can't do that. And I'm always, proving people wrong. So I'm like, and this is just the next thing I'm going to show them. And I was all in, right? And in this time, I'm also studying everything else. After 33 treatments, my mum started to wake up. She started to respond massively to it. She didn't just get up out of her wheelchair and start walking, but she started to move her hands. Like she started to have a flicker of wanting to talk, of wanting to, I could see she's trying to communicate. And I'm like, oh my God, she's in there. And then I lost access to the chamber. I'm like, okay, right. It had to go off on a contract. And I'm like, okay, next obstacle. This is obviously working. I need a hyperbaric chamber. How can I get that? So I mortgaged my house. I bought a hyperbaric chamber and I installed it in my house. All things are not easy to do. Yeah. And I started to put her through treatment after treatment, and she started to come back very, very slowly. And as she came back, I started to stay one step ahead of her in her recovery. And I'm studying, I'm working all day with her, putting her through this protocol that I'm developing as I go, running 5 companies. I had 5 companies at that time, and trying to do that all night. I ended up selling 3 and, trying to survive. And then, rinse and repeat, day in, day out, grinding thousands and thousands of hours of retraining her brain, keto diet, epigenetics, functional genomics, natural health supplements, you name it, I was studying it, functional neurology, vestibular systems, neurology, everything I possibly could to stay one step ahead of her in her rehab. It took me 2.5 years, to cut a long story short, to bring her back to full health. After 2.5 years, she had her full driver's license, full power of attorney. She went to the gym every day. She got up to walking about 4 or 5 Ks a day, and that's at 74, or 76 by now, And so that's why I wrote the book Relentless, because that is it's a mindset book. It's a story. It's our story. And it's a lot of running stories in there and things in there, but it's really the mindset that it takes to overcome massive, massive obstacles and to hold the vision. And it can be applicable to any sort of situation, if that makes sense. Just as a side note after that, unfortunately, a year and a half ago, I lost my dad, who'd been the rock, all the way through. And I was faced with this other next horrible situation when my dad had an aortic aneurysm, which is when the main aorta blew out. My dad had been a smoker and I'd never been able to stop him. And, it happened. And he survived the operation. He was in the hospital. It looked like he was going to pull through, but then he developed sepsis. And so after all the research and the knowledge that I'd gathered over these years, I knew that intravenous vitamin C and sepsis, so it was very powerful for sepsis. And so I wanted to do that in the hospital, in the critical care. He was in ICU. And I just came up against another brick wall of bureaucracy, and they wouldn't let me do it, even though he was dying, even though there was no other options. And so I fought for 15 days against the ethics committees and the medical team, and I fought with everything I had to get him, because it was the only shot. I mean, the clinical studies around this show a 48% drop in the mortality rate if you can get vitamin C into them.
But what were you? I mean, I'm sure. Were you sharing those studies with the doctors? Like, so what was their reason to not do it? If that's
I had professors on my side outside of the hospital, right? Because I'm really well connected through the work that I do with some of the world's best doctors, scientists, and so on. I had the research. They said to me, "We don't care about your research. It's a legal problem."
Well, you'll sign any kind of waiver or whatever.
I did, yeah. I said I would sign any quote, and I eventually won.
Scary.
But it took me 15 days to get there. And of course, my dad is deteriorating. And by the time I got the first vitamin C into him, he was at death's doorstep. Like multiple organ failure, could die any minute by the time I got the first one in. And the first vitamin C actually started to make massive differences. His white blood cell count improved massively. His CRP dropped in half. His blood pressure went back up because he was able to hold his own blood pressure. And I was like, oh my God, even at this like death's doorstep moment, the vitamin C was having an effect. But you need it every 6 hours, and you needed double the dose that I was allowed to give. And I had to have my GP come into the hospital to actually deliver it, and she could only come up twice a day. And the hospital stopped me. I went through this 15 days, but they thought it was one vitamin C, like one infusion. And I said, no, I need this every 6 hours. And they stopped me doing the second, and they stopped me. It took me 18 hours to fight through to get the second, 18 hours to fight through to get the third, and so on and so forth. So a couple of days later, my dad was beyond saving by this point. It just wasn't enough, fast enough. And that absolutely blew me to pieces, because my dad was just the most amazing human being. And we were forced to take him off life support. And, I lost that battle. So I know what it is to go all in and to win. And I know what it is to go all in and lose. Mm-hmm. But I can look back at that time, and I know that my dad knew that I was fighting with everything that I had for him. I gave him every possible, I just wish if I'd been medically trained, I just would have gone in and done it, but I couldn't. I ended up in jail. Who cares? Like my dad was dying, but I couldn't. I didn't know how to do it. They had him in 24-hour surveillance. They knew my background. They were watching me like a hawk. I basically didn't want him to come out of it by the end of it, because that would have shown, and there's like an 80-year history of intravenous vitamin C, and there's a 80-year history of hyperbaric. They don't get the light of day, these things, because there's no pharmaceutical company behind it. There's no impetus for financial gain. And so these therapies that are super powerful are just not seeing the light of day. So I've learned from that journey as well. And it was the hardest time of my life, and really made me re-examine a lot of things. But at least I know that my dad knows that I gave it everything I had, Yeah. And I wish things in the system beat us in that case. And then late in the last 6 months, my mum, who has continued to do really well, she ended up with a brain tumor and cancer 6 months ago. Like you couldn't write this stuff. It's like, when this happened and her face dropped and she started having massive problems. And again, we went to emergency. I said, she's having another event or something's going on in her brain. They sent me home. I went back 2 days later. I said, something's wrong. They sent me home. It's just still a disaster. I pushed and pushed and pushed, got an MRI. We found a brain tumor. We got the brain tumor out. Incredible surgeon team got tumor out, came back an aggressive CNS lymphoma, terminally ill. She won't make it till Christmas, probably. And this was October. There's nothing much we can do. She's too old to have methotrexate. That would kill her. And so I just went, not believing that. And I went off on this mission again. And I started studying the metabolic approach to cancer, keto diet, hyperbaric, intravenous vitamin C, off-label drug combinations, every research paper I could find on it. Took me 12 weeks, and I've managed to get rid of the tumors. They're gone. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And touch wood, because you never know with cancer. It's a tricky beast, and it can shift its metabolism. But, and this is where keto, if you have cancer, man, keto is the bomb. You want to be on a keto diet. She's on
Did,
keto
did you
diet,
give her
exogenous ketones.
did you give her exogenous ketones as well, or just
Absolutely.
you did? Okay.
Yeah, because I was struggling, and in her case, she was on dexamethasone, which is a steroid, which of course puts your blood sugars up. So we were struggling to do it naturally, as in, and we're trying to block the glycolysis pathway. Cancer uses glucose. Cancer also uses fatty acids and glutamine. So you have to shift your pathways, because you need to eat something. You can't not eat anything. But fasting for periods of time and intermittent fasting and keto are very powerful tools in the toolbox. They're not the only thing, but they're a very big piece of the puzzle. And depending on your type of cancer and the stage it's in, and how much, if you've got cachexia, the weight loss going on, you have to, there's a lot of nuance to that. So, take that with a grain of salt. And obviously I have, developed very extensive protocols and stuff for her. But
what kind of fasting schedule did you put your mom on? You said intermittent fasting and different, what are the variations that you use for her?
Yeah. So when we first got the diagnosis, she was on just one meal a day of salad, basically. That was it. I couldn't get her to do the whole 20, she wouldn't do the fast for days thing, which I wanted to do, but I couldn't get her to cooperate. So the best I could get was 1 meal a day, just vegetables. And I did that so that I could block at least the glutamine pathways, the fatty acid pathways, the glycolysis pathways, but still get some nutrients into her, because you're also dealing with an 80-year-old now who needs her protein, and she's got brain injuries and so on. So and then exogenous ketones into the mix, which were really a godsend, because that helped me keep her in ketosis despite the drugs and things that she was on at the beginning, especially, during the surgery times.
The benefit of that, it's the lowering of free radicals and inflammation, and it's a huge benefit, especially if you're dealing with cancer. Yeah.
Yep, and it blocks ketones cannot be used for fuel by cancer.
Correct. Yeah.
Tumors. And it also protects the brain, because Mum's brain has had a hell of a hard time, both with the aneurysm and now with this brain tumor and brain surgery and etc., and had inflammation right throughout the brain again. The ketones are very, very healing to brain tissue. So you want as many ketones as you can get in there. And the keto diet for her was, she would do it to a certain degree, but she wouldn't go the full hog. I just struggled with her to, and even though I controlled her diet. So, we've made compromises over the time a little bit. I'd like to have her on a more strict, but you've also, it's her decisions, her life, and she's very good, but she does, so at the beginning it was just vegetables. Then I've introduced, a little bit of fish and a little bit of chicken. And as we started to lose her protein levels, so I had to get those back up. So I've used a product that I love and import now called Perfect Aminos. That was a very
great product. I use it as well. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Dr. David Minkoff.
Yeah, he's here in Florida. He's like 4 hours from me. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Oh, yeah, lucky. He's brilliant. And so that was an amino mix that I was happy to put in. That's not going to hopefully feed the tumors. And nobody really knows, right? Some of this research still is in development and ongoing research. But when you start losing your albumin levels and your proteins going down and you've got weight loss going on, you've got to put something back into the mix. Yeah. So now she has a pescatarian keto diet
amazing.
Which is mostly vegetables, a little bit of fish, and occasionally a bit of chicken. And she's on a combination of off-label drugs as well that block different pathways. So it's not just about blocking the foods, but blocking the pathways with different drugs like statins and metformin. Metformin I'm a big fan of. It's a longevity drug. It's actually a diabetes drug, but it blocks the glycolysis pathway. And with that, I'm sure you and I could go down the biochemistry route and get right into the weeds, but that might bore people. But long story short, we're now, 12. So it took me 12 weeks to get rid of any sign of the tumors. on her MRI scan, and we are constantly still monitoring that. And, you never want to say you're cured, because cancer, as I said, is a tricky beast that can shift its metabolism. So you've got to stay on top of it and stay one step ahead of it. What I do, though, in these situations that I think might be valuable for the listeners is, if you're faced with any sort of situation, but a medical situation like this, is you gather as far as your finances will allow. And I'll caveat saying this, like, I've chucked the bus at this. I've spent, I've sold one of our houses to pay the costs of doing this. Okay, so not everybody has that opportunity. Blah blah blah, but I've put together a team of 12 doctors who are my advisory team. They like, I act like the CEO. I get the information from all these different doctors, and they're often contradicting, by the way. And then I make, from all the evidence and all the suggestions and all the protocols that I've developed with these doctors, and then I make the decision as to what I actually implement to the best of my ability.
Great tip and great idea. Lisa, that is, I don't even know what to say. Your stories are just absolutely heart-wrenching, inspiring. You wrote your last book, Relentless, before your mom was diagnosed with cancer. So are you going to revise it and do a part 2 to it? Because you got to add that story now to the mix, right?
Yeah, it's on the to-do list, Ben. I'm not quite sure whether I want to just revise the Relentless book or write another. I'm currently writing another book called Tough as Expletive.
Yeah, that explains you for sure.
and the reason it's a mental toughness resilience book, and it brings a lot of these things to bear in there. So I'm currently doing that, because what I found with the Relentless, the story is it didn't, I wanted it to do more than it did, because it wasn't a how-to book. So now I'm writing a how-to book, from a mindset perspective. I mean, there's a lot of the therapies and things in Relentless, and it's a really good read. And it's not just for people who have been through strokes and aneurysms and things. It is more for athletes with their mindset, or people that want to optimize their health or be empowered, or understand the limitations sometimes within our medical system. There's a lot of learnings in that book. Book number 4 is on its way slowly. And the other thing is, Ben, I've learned from this journey, is I'm 53 now, and I don't do the ultramarathoning anymore. And people often go, "Whoa, how did you, why did you stop?" It's like, because that used to take 20 to 30 hours of my week. And that was an opportunity cost to that, So when Mum went down, that was the end of that. And when I look back, it was high time. I was 48 when I retired. That's, probably 5 years too late, really. But I couldn't let go. I'm one of these people that I get a dog, like a dog with a bone.
That's clearly you.
I go too long. Yeah. So sometimes you need to know, and the moral of that story is know when to quit.
Yeah.
And that there are times in life where you have to change and adapt, and it's okay. Like I struggled with my identity for quite a long time after finishing my athletic career, if you like. I still train like a maniac, but I don't compete in any way anymore, and that's fine. But it took me a while, like, I'm a has-been, I'm used up, I'm old, that sort of rhetoric going in their head, that narrative. It took me a while.
Yeah.
It took me a while to actually get out of that and go, hang on a minute, I think you did enough.
Well, the thing about the challenges, the barriers you were having at the hospital, it's people who are facing that now the last 2 years with the COVID stuff, right? There are natural therapies and so many things that have been proven to work.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And my assistant actually ended up losing her dad because of that. They kept denying certain things I kept telling her to do for her dad. And they're like, and then eventually he lost his life. And I'm sure that happens. That's happened so many times. Over and over. So your story is very relatable in that sense. I'm sure somebody listening could relate to that. And then the HBOT thing, incredible. What an amazing resource. Anybody who has an HBOT, it's very popular in the US. I mean, they're getting more available.
You've got the Amen clinics and all that are big.
HBOT conference in Orlando last year. I have 2 colleagues that they have a company called HBot USA, and they put them into like chiropractic offices. And so
Wow.
take advantage of an HBot.
Absolutely.
Because like you said, even just for general well-being and health, and get somebody who knows how to use it and treat you the right way. But what I want to say, Lisa, to close out the conversation is just, you are such an incredible, inspirational, relentless, whatever it takes, like special human being, honestly. Like what you did
thanks.
What you did for your mom when she first got the aneurysm, what you did for your dad, what you did for your mom when she got the cancer scare, what you did for yourself, and just your mom and your dad are blessed to have you in their life. To have that you fight for them. I lost my dad in 2014.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I didn't have that fight that you have, right? And something I look back and like I have so many, could have done this, I could have done that. So hearing you share that, it's very inspirational to me, and I admire it very much. And I hope that somebody who's listening to this and watching this, and maybe they might be going through something similar, have the same fight that Lisa has. Do whatever it takes. Don't let the blockages at the hospital or the doctor tell you what's yes or what's no. It's your decision in your hands.
I think then if I can just round out by saying, like this is the key, and this is not to say that doctors are bad but just understand the limitations of the system, the way the system is developed. You're going to have to advocate. You're going to have to push. Don't sit back and be polite like I was at the beginning, and I left it up to them thinking, well, they've been to medical school. Who the hell am I? Don't think that. You have access.
That's what I did with my dad.
Everybody does that, Ben, because we're taught from a very young age that the white coat is the authority figure and you do whatever. And in this COVID situation that we've all been going, and without going down that horrible rabbit hole, has shown this again. From on high, you're told what to do. And you've got to understand there are commercial interests behind a lot of these things. It's not to say the individual doctor that's standing in front of you is not a wonderful human being doing the best he's or she is being, coached to do, but they have been taught by a system that is very much pharmacological based, that does not look outside the box, that is not allowed to look outside the box. Mm-hmm. So it's up to you then to take the wonderful knowledge they have, add it to the wonderful knowledge that other professions have, whether that's, chiropractic, osteo, naturopaths, keto experts, go on podcasts, listen to experts in different fields, go on PubMed, do your own research, type in, like if I'm, whatever I'm looking for, if I'm looking at a supplement for mum, I will look up at all the research. I just go supplement name, cancer or lymphoma or whatever, and just see what comes up. Do your own hard research, and you will start to feel more confident to say, hang on a minute, I'm not happy with that, or I want to question that, or why are you doing that? And push like hell for resources, because you won't get them, any other way. And I was blessed to have the wonderful parents that I have that gave so much to me. So it's just a giving back to them. If you'd had the most wonderful parents in the world, you want to give them the best. But even me, Ben, like when I look back at mum having that original aneurysm, I was at that point in my life a selfish athlete, totally focused. I expect my mum had spent her entire life taking me to sports events and supporting me through all my dramas and my sporting things, to the neglect of her own body. Mm-hmm. And this was, when I look back now, I go, why wasn't I onto her about her weight and her health and her, why was I just looking at my own selfish end? So we all have regrets. The thing is, you cannot beat yourself up. And I still have regrets with Dad. Why didn't I break the law, and go in and put in vitamin C and push the people out of the way and got it in there somehow, you know? So there's always those things, what if. But you have to know you did the best at the time with the resources that you had, with the understanding that we had, with the training that you had. But moving forward, let's open our eyes a little bit to the possibilities next time we're facing a situation. And that's what this podcast is really about.
Yeah, beautifully said. That's a great way to end the conversation. And so share where they could get your books, your website. You also have Awesome podcast. And I'm going to go on.
Yeah, Ben's coming on.
Yeah,
Yep.
welcome to Pushing the Limits podcast. But share your other resources so they can check you out.
Yeah, Pushing the Limits is a passion of mine. It's a podcast been going for 6 years. I'm having Ben on there, so you'll be able to hear him on there. Lisa Tamati, that's TAMATI.com is my website, lisatamati.com. That sort of houses all my programs, and I do epigenetics, DNA testing, run coaching, my books, everything. Of course, my books are also on Amazon. If you look up Relentless or Running Hot and Running to Extremes, so the third book is that one, Running to Extremes. They are on Amazon if you're in America. I know you guys love Amazon. Otherwise, yeah, just Lisa Tamati on all Instagram, and lisatamati.com is the website. I think that's the best one. And Pushing the Limits, yeah, this podcast.
Yeah, that's right. And you also
Thanks
have a great YouTube, which we'll put all of that down below. So we'll put
Appreciate
all the
it.
links. Go check out Lisa. I mean, she's so inspirational. Go get her books, share it with somebody. And I acknowledge you for who you are. I'm so grateful we had this conversation. And thank you for the amazing, relentless work that you do in this world.
Thanks, Ben. I really appreciate you, your extreme knowledge, your big brain that you have, your depth of knowledge on keto, and I can't wait to share your insights with my audience because I need to learn from you. So it's going to be exciting.
I can't wait. Thanks, Lisa.